Hey crafty friends, welcome back. Today we have a tutorial for this felt cat. This is a beginner level project, great for kids with a little bit of adult supervision or those who just want to do some basic stitches. I have a link to a free pattern in the description below. So go ahead, click that link, print it out, come back here and let's sew this together. To sew this felt cat plushie, you're gonna need the following: felt in the color you want your cat, something to trace your pattern with, scissors, sharper the better, definitely not kid scissors, some sewing floss or thread. Sewing floss is going to look thicker and be more visible. Thread is going to look a little thinner and it might be easier to use. I'm doing two colors, one that matches the color of my felt and one that I'm going to use for my cat's eyes. You're going to need a sewing needle. This is an embroidery floss needle, so it has a little bit thicker hole here at the top. And the pattern, if you click the description below, there's a link to this pattern. You can click it and print it. So go print that pattern, cut it out, and come on back here. Next, it's time to trace your pattern. So as you're tracing it, make sure you're putting your pieces right on the edge of your felt so we can save this inside felt for other things. And all of these that have a cut to, trace it one side on the place where it says cut to, and you can see your pattern edges, and then flip it. And the second time you trace it on the backward side. This will just make our patterns line up a little bit nicer when we're sewing our creature together. And then as you're cutting them out, just make sure that you cut off your tracing lines. So cut inside the pattern just a little bit because we don't want those to show up in our design. Also, as you're cutting it out, hang on to these felt scraps. These work great for stuffing inside of your animal as we're getting it fluffy. You can also use polyfill. I've used plastic bags, but I think this leftover felt scraps are my favorite. It's easy, it's cheap, and it's already included in the project. Once you have all your cat pieces cut out, we're going to lay them out together, and you want them to be opposites because these cats are going to line up together. We want to make sure as we're adding our arms and legs that we're not putting some on the inside and some on the outside. So I'm lining them up back to back, and I'm going to start by sewing on an eyeball. So I'm grabbing my thread, I am putting it into my needle, and then I'm going to pull both ends of my thread exactly together. And I'm going to make a loop knot here, which is where you go in a circle. Put the two ends of your string through the middle of the circle. And then I try and put my finger over where the lines are crossed and pull on my needle side so that I can keep my knot kind of at the end of my string. If you end up with really long strings, it's fine, just trim them off. And now I'm going to add my cat's eye. I want the eye about right here. And I want this messy side of my thread on the inside of my cat. So I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to poke it through, and I'm going to poke it back through pretty close to where I started. I'm going to pull my thread through, and then I'm going to put my needle between these two threads before I pull it tight. This is just going to give me a knot to keep that secure. And now I have an eye on this side, but it's tiny. It's too small for me. So I'm actually going to go back through on this side, and I'm just going to make sure that I cross over where that first eye dot was. I'm going to make that eye a little bit bigger, and it's getting there. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to make sure my back needle, my back thread crosses over that eye again. And there we go. That's a much bigger cat eye. And now we're going to knot it off by putting our needle through these bundles of thread in the back, and then taking the tail end, and we're going to wrap it around the front of the needle twice. So there's 1, 2, and then I'm going to put my thumb over the top of it to hold it in place as I slide the needle out, and that's just going to keep my knot right here at the back. We're going to trim this off, and there's my eyeball. We're going to repeat those same steps on the inside of the second piece, but again, make sure line up your two pieces first so you can make sure that that ragged inside is on the inside of both of them. So now I know that I need to start my needle from this side so the messy side stays inside. Okay, I'm getting ready to start. I've got my clean eye on this side, my messy eye right here, and as I'm starting the eye on this side, I want to get it in kind of the same area, so I'm just going to poke it through here. Now I'll get my starting knot on this side. I can pull it all the way through. Not quite tight against the back. I'm going to go back through kind of close and put my needle through those two strings as I pull it. Now I'm tightened, and again I have that tiny eye on the front, and I'm just going to go back through it 2 or 3 more times before I knot off my thread. Now we've got our bigger eye. Now when I put my two pieces of cat together, They've got the clean eyes on the outside and the messy knots on the inside. We are going to repeat that as we attach the legs to both sides of our cat body. To add the arms and tails, I'm getting my thread that's a similar color to my felt. And again, I'm threading my needle, and then I'm pulling both ends real close together, making my loop knot, putting the thread through, putting my finger and thumb holding where they're crossed and pulling it tight, and then pulling my needle to the end so this is straight and even. I'm going to put my leg on my cat where I want that back leg to be, and I'm going to start in the back with the same messy side where the eye is. I'm going to go in one side, pull my thread not tight against the back. I'm going to go back through pretty close to where I pulled that through, and now I can pull it tight, and as I near the end, I'm poking my needle through that hole of the two strings, and this time I don't need a big mark for sewing on the leg, just one is fine. So I'm going to now knot my thing in place by poking my needle through that bundle of threads, wrapping it once, twice, putting my thumb over the top to hold it in place, pulling it out. Perfect. Trimming my thread. Now I've got the messy side on this side, tidy side over here, and I'm going to line up and add this front paw the same way, creating a loop knot over here, and then starting in the back of my cat and going through both pieces of felt, pulling it almost to the end, back here, going through next to it. We're going to go through that middle, pull it tight, and then go through the middle. Just needle out enough that I can go 1, 2 around it, thumb over the top, pull it out, and trim. And now we have the beginning of this cat. The last thing is that cats have whiskers, and I think whiskers are kind of fun. So we are going to make some whiskers for this cat. The way that I'm going to do that is with my dark thread, I'm going to do a loop knot, pull it towards the end, and then I'm going to find the front nose of my cat about right here. I'm going to go back in the back where I've got my messy knots. I'm going to pull this all the way to the end, and then without knotting, I'm just going to trim it right here. Now my cat has 2 little whiskers on that side, but I feel like cats have more than 2 whiskers. So I'm going to knot this string. I'm going to do it one more time. So I've got my knot. I'm going to put it back here, kind of where I did the first one. Pull it all the way through, and I'm going to trim it similar to where I trimmed that first one. Now my kitty's got some little whiskers by the nose. We're going to repeat all those steps we just did on the second piece of the body. Again, remember we want the messy knots on the same side of it. So the tidy knots will be on the outside when we're sewing it together. And we're not going to sew the tail yet. We're going to add the tail as we're piecing the whole finished cat together. So go ahead, add your other legs and whiskers, and then pop on back here. Now that we have the whiskers and legs sewn onto our cats, it's time to start putting it together into one piece. So again, I'm getting a length of thread. Usually I measure from the tips of my fingers to my shoulder, and it ends up being about enough. If you're a kid and you don't have such long arms, you might want to go a little bit longer. And if you do run out of thread partway through the project, it's fine. Just knot off where you're at and you can add more thread. This time, instead of doing a double knot, I'm just going to do it on one side of my thread. So just a single thread that I am, again, doing in a circle knot and sliding down. We're going to put the 2 pieces of our cats together. And then right here, I'm going to bend back these 2 legs, and kind of right between them, I am going to put my starting stitch. You can do this by going through both pieces of felt, pulling my thread way through and almost here at the end. And I am just going to put my needle kind of in the middle of this bundles of thread, and then I'm going to pull it tight. Now we've started. Okay, now we're going to do what's called a blanket stitch, and my thread is feeling really long right now. I just have a short tail. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. I don't want it to get caught in the project so my thread's doubling up, but I don't want to have to manage quite so much either. Pulling it down is going to help with that, and I am putting the tail of my knot inside my felt. All right, now we're going to go through both pieces of fabric, And we're going to grab the end of this thread that just came through and we're going to wrap it around the front of our needle and pull it all the way through to the end. We're going to do that again. We're going to go through both pieces of felt, grab the tail end of this, pull it all the way through. This is a modified blanket stitch, and it gives it just a nice kind of finished look, having a thread in between your two pieces of felt and these little lines along the side. It is kind of hard to see with my black fabric. I maybe should have made a different color cap, but I couldn't resist. We're going to go down right almost to the end of where we want to start adding that tail. We're going to keep going with this blanket stitch. All right, I'm going to do maybe one more. All right, now we're going to grab our cattail. We're going to peel these both apart, and we're going to stick that tail right in the middle of the felt. Inside a little bit, and now instead of doing a blanket stitch, we're going to do what's called a running stitch, which I think is even easier than a blanket stitch. You go through all the pieces of felt, one side, and then you're going to turn it, move your needle up a little bit, and then you're going to go back through all three pieces of felt. And we're just going to do that the whole length of the tail, where we just go in and out. Okay, and then once we get to the end of that tail, we're going to continue with our blanket stitch from here up to our ears, and we're going to pause at those ears. Again, the blanket stitch, we're going to go through both pieces of felt, wrap the end where our string just came out over the needle and pull it tight. Through both pieces, over the end of our needle, pull it tight. Once you get to those ears, instead of going up and down in the blanket stitch, we're actually going to do that running stitch again, where we go in and out so that our ears can fold back away from each other. So we're going to go in one side and out the other along the line of the cat's head, not up and around the ears. We're just going to leave them. We're just going to go in and out. Once we're past the ears, we're going to continue with that blanket stitch around the cat's face and nose. You're going to have to be really close and slow and careful around the nose. Make sure that you're pushing threads in if you need to. And we're going to continue with the blanket stitch all the way down until we're between the arms, and then we're going to pause and we're going to stuff our polyfill or our felt scraps into our cat before sewing it closed. So now that I'm past the ears, I'm continuing with the blanket stitch, going down around the face. It is most important that you just keep the two edges of felt together. If the rest of it isn't lining up perfectly, that is okay. We're going to fill it with stuffing. Be real careful down here by the nose where we added these whiskers. You're going to want to not pull the whiskers in as we're stitching around it. Okay, so I'm pausing right here between my cat's front arms. Now we're going to take our felt scraps or whatever you want to stuff it with, and we're going to start stuffing. And the way that you do it is that you want to stuff the furthest away things first. So we're going to try and get fluffy stuff into the nose, into the back of the tail, and the head before we start stuffing the middle. You might need to cut your felt scraps smaller if they're having a hard time fitting in. Sometimes I'll use the backside of a pen or pencil to help me get really far away things. This I might not need. I'm just getting little bits of felt and then smushing it into my cat. Try not to get the paws. Use some scrap threads. And I don't have quite enough scrap to fill the whole thing, so I am actually going to use a cut up plastic bag for the middle of this belly. Once you have your cat all full up as tight as you want it, you're going to have to come back and pull that blanket stitch tight. And then we're going to go back through. We're going to continue the blanket stitch all the way to the end or all the way to our starting stitch. It might be a little more tricky to sew Now that we have it full of plush stuff, you're just going to want to make sure that you're grabbing the edges of your felt, and you might have to push the stuffing in as you go. And once it's all sewed up, you can kind of wiggle it around with your fingers if you need to move it back down. Now just push it in and continue around the edge of your felt. All right, I'm back to my starting stitch. I'm going to go through it, and this time instead of wrapping it once, I'm going to wrap it twice. Pull my needle all the way through, and then I'm going to stick my needle back into my plush. Carefully direct where it's going, so I pull it out the back. I'm going to pull it really tight. I'm going to trim my thread right here, and then the end of it's going to go back into my plush. It's going to disappear in there so it's less likely to get pulled. And now we can push the padding in your creature around a little bit, get it lined up so it looks and feels the way that you want it to, and we're done. If you like this, be sure to like, follow along, and come back next week for a new pattern and another easy and fun sew along.